Okay, looks like we're live. Welcome, everyone. This is the Policy Committee on March 4th, 2021, and it is 4:36, calling the meeting to order. We have a quorum with Dr. Gant and Dr. Maddox and myself. We're also joined by Dr. Ezekiel, Attorney Pruitt, Dr. Thomas, and Mr. Harris and Ms. Tillman. We have a long agenda, but the first thing we need to do is approve the minutes from February 18th. I looked over them. I think they're okay. Dr. Maddox and Dr. Gant.
I move that we approve the minutes.
Second.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Okay. The next step is to amend or adopt the agenda. I think we can leave it alone. In my opinion, it's kind of long and we may decide to postpone some things, but at least at the moment, I think it's okay. Unless, are there any other opinions or thoughts? Okay.
Dr. Yeager, I did have one thought about BBC.
Yeah.
I know there was some timeliness there, and if we don't get to that today, is that going to be okay? If we don't get to that at the bottom of the agenda with the committee structures?
So was the plan, Dr. Gant, to move this up to tonight's work session and talk about it? Or if we do that, we could put it first as just a draft and then talk about it at the work session.
Right. I don't know. I would welcome Dr. Maddox and Dr. Thomas's feedback as well. I would think that it could, I know we have our tentative March goal for the committees to be done, but I know we also talked about being sure that we were done with the policy, at least the major revisions of the policies. And so I would think that it could very well move to our next regular policy meeting. But I also want to be, at least consistent with the spirit of that discussion that we had. And then I also know we have our the cognitive report that we received that may also have some just implications even around our previous conversations about committees. So I could go either way. Dr. Thomas or Dr. Maddox, what do you all think?
I agree with you, what you just said, that we could move it to the next, into April.
So Ms. Tillman, I'm sorry, did you see that Ms. Hull, you got her in, never mind, okay. And I agree, Dr. Maddox and Dr. Gant. I think we can wait. I know there are one or two of the committees I was in the last week or so referenced, like next steps in terms of leadership and who would be members of those committees. But I think if we are just provide that clarity and the expectation that we move on with the current leadership structure on the committees, I think we'll be fine. As long as people know that this is what we're doing, this is our timeline, and we need them to continue the work. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Okay. I could append this draft to my policy committee report, or I don't know, how should I guess I can just email this draft to the full board and see what they think. So we have to get the process going, even if we don't have something to present tonight.
Yeah, I think that could work. I think that'll at least be sure that it's on our radar. But then also, again, that will prevent us from making too many changes if there are new thoughts about how we do committees after we discuss our cognitive report.
Okay, sounds good to me. Okay, so shall we adopt the agenda as written then?
Move that we adopt the agenda as written.
Second.
Hey, Nicole.
Hello. Sorry, driving, but I'm here.
Okay, thank you for being here. All in favor of adopting the agenda as written, say aye.
Aye.
So achieved. Dr. Thomas, would you like to provide us with your superintendent report?
Yes, ma'am. And I only have two really quick things. One, I know Dr. Gant referenced Cognia, and we will be discussing that at the board meeting tonight. But I've said before, but after reading our most recent report, I think the work of our policy committee is well noted and acknowledged, and just great progress has been made in the way of revising policies and updating policies to be reflective of the priorities of the district and how the district policy work should be approached, and knowing that many of these policies were outdated. So I just commend the group for that. And then I do have one policy, not for today, but that I would like for us in the near future. We've been researching area school districts policy on on public comment at board meetings. And so I would like for us to put that on an upcoming agenda, just so that we can hopefully be more effective and efficient with our time and the mental ability of our board members on Thursday nights. I just think we do a lot of heavy lifting, and wanting to be sure that the opportunity for public comment is there, but yet being able to manage that in a way that allows us to operate efficiently as a board. So I will get with you, Dr. Yeager, to see about getting that on an upcoming agenda.
Okay.
And
great.
that's it for me.
Okay, thank you. I don't have much to add either, other than just I was going to mention the BBC or BBC, excuse me, BBC committee work that I just basically threw together, rearranged and simplified, and tried to just take the existing committee structure and rearrange it according to our discussion at the retreat. You can take your own look and see how I did. But I guess probably we'll get to that at the very end of this meeting, or probably not until the next meeting. I was going to comment on the Cogni report, but I will not take the time to do that right now. The only other issue is Greg has been recommending that we readdress KG. The board punted it back to us last month, and we do need to look at that again. So that'll be probably on our agenda for next policy meeting, regular policy meeting. He's made some suggested changes. Okay, that's all I have. Shall we move forward with the new business?
Dr. Yeager, could I make just one comment on that public comment thing?
Sure.
I think there's a recent statute enacted about requiring nobody else is required to, but now recently school boards are required to have public comment. I don't remember the details of it, but it's just something we'll need to look at when you look at that issue.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Okay. So Dr. Gant had mentioned that we would be looking at the recess policy soon. I didn't realize until I started looking at today's agenda that that's what we were going to talk about first. So let's see, let me open up my notes. The district, and I guess the policy subgroup that worked with the district, recommended that this policy just be rescinded. So I would like to open up the conversation. Dr. Gann, I believe you worked on this with Mr. Gaskins. Is that correct?
Yes, and I think the thought was, so like we want, Mr. Gaskins, correct me if I'm wrong. So we definitely need to, I think, look at the recess policy, but I think it was mentioned somewhere else as well, like recess was included in another policy. And that is why we thought that it would be unnecessary to have it in two places. Mr. Gaskins, do you recall our conversation?
I think Dr. Ezekiel is here instead of Mr. Gaskins. Is that correct?
Right. That's correct.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh,
But you are
okay.
correct, Dr. Gant, that policy EEE-R is where it's mentioned in the policy manual.
Right, and is that wellness? Isn't it? I'm getting it confused. I think
you're
it
right.
was under the wellness area.
Mm-hmm. Wellness program that daily recess and breaks. All district elementary schools will provide a minimum of 15 minutes of supervised recess, preferably outdoors. And then there's a lot of other language there as well.
Right. And so our thoughts were, we didn't necessarily, it needs to be definitely looked at, but we didn't know if it needed to be in both places.
Okay. What do other folks think about that? Obviously, I absolutely think we have to have recess, and that we should require at least, I thought 30 minutes based on my reading, but you said 15 minutes is what's in the other policy, Mr. Harris?
Yes, ma'am. Other policy, EEE R1 says at least 15 minutes of supervised recess.
Yeah, and this came around last year in policy, so I think there are several of us that actually think it should be 30 minutes. And partially because just developmentally, I mean, personally, I think it should be more than 30 minutes, but that's me. But also because this is where our state was going, and it narrowly, it didn't pass. But the point with the policy that's before us was a question of, do we need it in both places?
Okay.
Or does the other one need to be then modified if something has changed about this one?
Okay. Well, so just subtle differences. The state law actually passed both votes. It was the governor who vetoed the law.
That's right.
Saying that while he agreed with the policy, he believed that local school districts should do it themselves. And so this was our opportunity to do it ourselves. But I do see your point that if it's already in EE, it doesn't need to be added. I mean, we don't need to have duplication, but we probably should bring EE up and work on it then and make sure it's exactly what we want. And I think 15 minutes is too short. I also think some of the other ideas that were in that American Academy of Pediatrics report probably need to be thought through in terms of like when we have it, making sure it's not substituted for PE, et cetera. Okay. So do we then postpone this until we can look at the other one?
I don't know if that means we bring it, we maybe, and you and Dr. Thomas and Dr. Harris would know like the agenda for next time. So I guess this would need to go through you all, but if it's possible to bring both of them back, so both policies, so that we can look at them side by side and then determine, have discussion around that. And I'm sure that, after that discussion, that the district would want to get, feedback as well from our principals and teachers, actually. And so.
Okay, that makes sense to me. So should we make a motion to postpone this one?
Well, I actually have a question before we move to do so. So is it my understanding that we are just gonna table any concerns we have about this policy so that we can bring EE back, and I guess talk about whatever regs, or I don't know, but is that what we're doing now? We're not taking this policy away, but we're going to address whether it should be 15 minutes versus 30 minutes versus something else when we talk about EE.
Yeah, I think that's what I heard Dr. Gant suggest, is that we just set this aside. We do not rescind it. It will stay on the books if we don't rescind it.
Okay.
We won't rescind it and then go take a look at EE. I don't think that makes sense. I think we should just postpone. I believe that's the right word, Mr. Pruitt. Postpone until the next time, until we can also bring forward the EEER wellness regulation.
Gotcha.
And so I'm good with that. This one would stay in place and just be postponed.
If I could add, Dr. Yeager, I do think that one thing about EER1 is that since it was updated so much more recently, the language is probably a little bit more aligned.
I can't. Am I?
We can hear you. Can you not hear Mr. Harris?
Oh, I think she muted. The EER1 is a little bit more, seems a little more aligned with some of the recent values of the board. And one thing I just want to point out in this policy, that it does say that breaks may be withheld from students for disciplinary or academic reasons. But EER1, because it was recently updated, says that does not encourage the withholding of breaks from students for disciplinary infractions. So this one is actually slightly in contradiction with that policy. So it is something we do need to look at. The language in EER1 is much more updated and much more flexible and allows breaks and encourages recess more.
So I guess a question that I would just have, and it should not interfere with us moving forward with the vote on this matter, but my question would be, I guess, around how to make sure that recess was inclusive. I'm not sure if there is like adaptive playground equipment at the playgrounds, but I would want to know how we are including recess or allowing our exceptional students to participate in recess as the other students would. So again, it should not have any merit to the vote today, but that is something I'm very interested in learning more about when we do discuss or bring this policy back for discussion.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. So Mr. Harris, are you recommending that we delete that sentence right now and leave the rest of it in place? But then it has to go through all of the hoops now. So just let's just postpone.
I was just pointing it out as like that is a direct contradiction to the other policy, and the other one is definitely much well written, much better than this one is.
Okay, but we will deal with this on the 18th, I think, and push it to the next board meeting. Okay, shall we take a motion for that?
So moved.
Dr. Gant says she's having a hard time hearing. Dr. Gant, if you can hear us, we're going to vote on postponing IEDA until March 18th policy committee meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, I think I heard her. Or was that Ms. Hall? All right, well, I think I heard at least three of us. So yeah, okay, we'll move that one to the next meeting. Okay, moving to the next one, which is policy IFCB, field trips and excursions. And then there is also the field trips and excursions regulation, IFCBR1. Both were recommended to revise, but the revisions were quite mostly just technical, changing names, adding designate, adding the list of approved charter bus companies. So they're pretty minor revisions. And then if you've got my document, you'll see I put a whole bunch of stuff in there, thoughts about how we might modify this policy beyond what was recommended. I don't know how anybody feels about those issues. My experience comes from working with the LSGT at Cedar Shoals, trying to facilitate experiential learning for the science teachers and hitting our head hard on the fact that they can't get off campus very easily, and trying to get through those hoops using the LSGT funds, but really just completely hogtied to get off campus and do any kind of field trips or working in nature, going down to the creek to take samples, anything like that. So that's why I put in the text that I did, suggesting we consider some of these other possibilities, which I don't know how y'all feel about it, but that would probably mean we should postpone this one until we can work through some of these suggested changes. Dr. Thomas, did you have a chance to look at those thoughts? Do you have thoughts about that?
I do not, and I agree. I could understand the reason for postponing. We've had some questions that have come up kind of around this area a little bit since we've been out during the pandemic, but I can see us postponing this.
I would really like to work on some things that would improve the odds of teachers being able to increase the number of field trips.
Yes, yes. Having worked in a setting like I did, the value of those trips for so many of our students, and I recognize there's a competing interest there for seat time and wanting to teach standards and content, but I also believe that for many of our students, the opportunity to experience and to see what's being taught actually strengthens the opportunity for understanding content. And we often, our mindset and our privilege is such that we assume when we're teaching material that people have a firsthand experience that allows them to make a to world or self to text connection. But for so many of our kids, they don't have that experience. And so I've always felt strongly that, you know, again, I understand when teachers say we need to be in classrooms, our leaders, but sometimes it can click a lot better when the kids are able to really see in action what we're talking about or have those exposure opportunities. So,
Yeah, I know that's true for science. So,
oh, definitely.
yeah. Okay, well, Dr. Ezekiel, did you have any thoughts on this policy?
Mr. Gass just let me know that it was sent to Mr. Mark Weaver in transportation, and most of the change that you just mentioned with the alignment of the standards and adding the superintendent designee and the charter carrier was all things that he pretty much added, and basically wanted me to let everybody know that most field trips pretty much are approved by the principal at the school level. They have to sign off form when teachers submit a field trip request. And then the other type of field trips, overnight, multiple days, going out of state, those things will have to be approved by superintendent or designee, and then of course approved by the Board of Education.
As the policy is currently written, yeah. Well, so I guess I would still like to consider postponing until we can maybe work with transportation and see what might be available for setting more than one bus aside for field trips or purchasing adequate buses. I didn't really understand why we can't use district vans. I still don't quite understand why we can't train teachers and get teachers certified to drive, because I heard lots of discussions from teachers saying they couldn't even take a student across to Oconee County for a competition because she wasn't allowed to drive her, and they didn't want to put one student on a school bus. So there's some oddities where reality hits the policy that I think we want to think through and maybe get some input from the community and the teachers about these things. So
That's
but,
always
okay.
been a insurance issue. That's
I know.
not required, but that's something the GSBA, our insurance carrier, really frowns on, particularly like adults carrying children in their own personal vehicles, vans, you know, there's safety concerns of different kind of vans. So, you know, the school bus is what they're used to. They know that meets safety standards. So that's where that comes from.
Yeah, and I understand that. I also understand why we need to pay for charter buses instead of personal cars. But it's just the outcome is making it impossible for teachers to take students on experiential learning excursions. And so we've got to find the edge. We've got to push the edge a little bit and see if we can't improve that situation.
Not taking a position, just letting you know where it comes from.
No, I understand that. I understand that. So anyway, Dr. Maddox, maybe you could make a motion to postpone this one too, now that we've spent 30 minutes postponing our top two policies.
Move to postpone it.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Hall or Ms. Hall. I'm just gonna give you a PhD, okay, Ms. Hall?
I know, right?
All right, I see Dr. Gand is back on. Can you hear us now better?
Yes.
Okay, great. Are you okay with this idea of postponing this one?
Yes, I heard portions of that, and that would be fine.
All right, so the rest I think are pretty straightforward. We might even be able to get through them all. I don't know, we'll see. Policy IG was the guidance program and the recommended revisions.
Dr. Yeager, sorry, you didn't take a vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. Wasn't it obvious? Sorry. Thank you. All right, all in favor of postponing?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you,
Aye.
sorry about that.
No, thank you. I get a little excited. That was IFCB and IFCBR1. Okay, thank you, Mr. Harris. All right, IG is the guidance program. There were some modest revisions to this policy made by the district and the subgroup, appending the word school in front of all the references, changing the name of program standards that we now refer to American School Counseling Association National Model. Revising the goals to be a little broader, it looked like, more academic, college and career readiness, and social emotional learning. Again, plugging in phrases that are aligned with our strategic plan. And then replacing a long list with comprehensive school counseling program. So I thought most of these were just clarity and cleaning up a little bit. I didn't see any fundamental shifts in the recommended revisions. But are there any questions or comments for Dr. Ezekiel? If not, I will take a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor of moving these recommended revisions in policy IG to the full board, please say aye.
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 Thank you. Policy, moving forward to number 5, policy IGB, student support teams. So this was a revision recommended, pretty extensive revisions, but it looked as though it was to insert relevant law and delete most of the old policy except for a few sort of general sentences. Dr. Ezekiel, did you want to say something about this, or Mr. Pruitt?
Mr. Johnson just said that the deletes don't follow the current process, and that the SST student support team is for behavior and academics. And it's just been revised based on Georgia policy.
Yeah, and this is just a word for word restatement of the entire Georgia state reg.
Okay. Any questions or concerns about the revision? All right, I'll take a motion.
So moved.
Entertain a motion. Okay, I think that was a
Second.
1 and a second. All in favor of moving forward the recommendations for IGB? And do we want to put, no, just IGB, sorry. IGB, say aye.
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 Okay, got ahead of myself again. Okay, the next one is policy IHA, grading systems. This was a very minor revision recommended to simply add or designate after approval by the superintendent. This was done routinely throughout these policies, which I assume, Dr. Thomas, are you okay with those changes of adding a designee instead of just you approving everything?
Yes, ma'am, that's very appropriate. I know a lot of times some grade changes after a year do come to me for signature. Right now, they all come to me, but they are usually vetted by Dr. Crossland, our director of secondary ed, with either the principals and or assistant principals and counselors as well.
Great, okay. Any other questions or concerns about these revisions? I saw you, Dr. Gant shaking her head. Dr. Maddox or Ms. Hall?
I don't have any questions.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion then.
Are we on IHA, the grading?
Yes.
Did y'all take a look at my comment about letter grades for grades 4 and 5?
So that was in the reg, I think, but we can talk about that now if we like. It was in the reg, I think.
My bad.
Okay.
I always look at
So
them together.
I know you do. That's and yeah. I think IHA is very simple, and then IHA reg is a little more complicated. So let's do 6 first. Let's do IHA. I think I had a motion. Shall we have a vote on moving IHA forward according to the recommendations? All in favor? Aye.
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 Okay. All right. So now moving to the reg. So this was a review only recommendation, but Mr. Pruitt noted that the reg has basically passed, or sorry, let me pull it up. it had a insufficient progress as one of the grades, an I for 4th and 5th graders, that does not reflect or does not refer to the 70% numerical score that the state law seems to require.
Right.
So, Dr. Ezekiel, did you have a thought about that comment? Should we add a sentence that says something like, you know, insufficient progress reflects numerical scores below 70? Or I don't know, how did you feel about that one?
We didn't talk about this one. He just told me that we didn't recommend any changes, but just from my background knowledge of being a teacher in a district and AP in a district, I remember when all of this came about, when we went from having report cards with numbers to the whole standards-based report card. That's where all of this comes from. And so at the time, we didn't put a value with the standards base. That just has never been the case. I'm not saying it should be or shouldn't be. I'm just giving his.
But the thing is, there's a state regulation that says if letter grades instead of numerical grades are given in grades 4 through 8, the local board of education shall determine the relationship of letter grades to the numerical passing score of 70.
And we do that for 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, but we do not do it for 4th and 5th graders. So that's the distinction. So we need to do something to be in compliance.
I think because 6th and 7th and 8th, they do numerical grades, which go to the A, B, C, F. But in those lower grades, I don't know how many years ago it was, but that's when we started to do standards-based report cards. And so each standard is rated at that E, M, P, or I, but I have never seen a grade correlated to those particular letters for those grading scale.
Could it be just, and I don't even know if this is, Mr. Pruitt, I did hear what you said as far as like the local board of education will establish this. Since we are in the in Clark County School District's classrooms, I wonder if this would be something for the district to take a look at how they can correlate those grades. Like in my mind, I would just think the exceeds would be equivalent to the A, meets, B, maybe. I don't even know. And I don't know if, progressing would be a C or whatever, but it certainly seems like maybe more conversation before the board can establish this would need to be had around what is equivalent.
I think the thinking when all this was done was that if you do that, then why do we have these other labels, basically? So if you're going to say that this is equivalent to an 80, then why not just call it a B 80, like 6th, 7th, and 8th, and even the upper grades do?
Well, so my question would be, and maybe Dr. Ezekiel, you can clarify it, but it was my understanding that with the standard-based grades, all of them, you didn't have like the continuum of the grades. Everything could not be an exceed or meet. Sometimes it was just whether they're meeting the standards, but it wasn't possible to get an exceed. That's what my understanding was in elementary school. So if we were to put E equals A, meet equals B, what would happen in those situations where it's not possible to get an exceed? Now, does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am. The problem with this tends to be that each school has their own representation of, like, just hearing you say an exceeds can't happen. It can happen. We do have, I think was created maybe 4 or 5 years ago, a rubric, I think by Mr. Jarbo when he was here. And so some of the language in those rubrics kind of says like a student consistently does whatever the standard is, or inconsistently does whatever the standard is. And then the teacher is making that determination of if the student is doing it in an inconsistent manner or a consistent manner. And so that's how they are pretty much determining if they are insufficient or if they're progressing or if they're meeting the standard or exceeding the standard.
So
I mean, there is a lot of subjectivity, I guess in the standard space, and I think it ultimately leads to just large, not necessarily disparities, but like people not being exactly on the same page as far as how, like how something is assessed.
And can I just add that I think the only level that's it's in the law is passing or failing. We don't have to worry about A, B's, and C's. We just have to worry about the insufficient progress or the not passing. I don't think it talks, Mr. Pruitt, am I interpreting that correctly? It's really not saying A's and B's and C's have to be assigned. It's saying you have to set the bar for passing.
Yeah, that's right. The law, I mean, this is all great philosophical discussion, but the law is you got to have 70 as your passing grade for grades 4 and up. And if you use some label, whether it's a letter or whatever, other than a number, then you got to correlate that to your passing grade of 70.
Which is what our I seems to be, is that I is insufficient and it would be not passing. Is that a correct interpretation of the I?
If I'm hearing what Mr. Pruitt is talking about, then I would say that anything below that 70 would be an I.
Okay, so we can add a sentence to this policy then, similar to what I threw out there as a draft, which was insufficient progress towards the standards I for 4th and 5th grade reflects a numerical score below 70. Does that work? I mean, don't let it tell you that something that's not right, but it seems like if you acknowledge that the I means they're not passing, insufficient, then that's the 70. Whatever the 70 is, I don't know how you measure the 70, but at least we're saying that that's a 70. Dr. Thomas, did you have thoughts about this?
Right, you see, I unmuted, then I still didn't say anything because, right, so it would believe, the local board of education shall determine the relationship with letter grades. So anything at an I would be below a 70, right?
Right.
Because a 70 is typically what we say is passing. And I'm thinking, I guess it's relevant because in some instances, there are policies like talking about retention and such that might reference those I's. So clarity on that would help with other areas where that language is utilized. Yeah, so then the question does become, so if you're standards based, how do you know my child has a 70? But teachers still grade, so you're right. I mean, the teachers are still grading for accuracy or completion, or so there has to be some numerical way for teachers to assess student mastery and understanding. So I don't think that's far off.
Ms. Tillman, do you have the sentence that I wrote in that document? You want me to read it, type it into the screen or chat?
Yes, could you type it into the chat?
And I'm driving, so when you finish, could you please read it for me so I don't get a ticket?
Sure. It says insufficient progress towards standards, parentheses I, for 4th and 5th grade reflects a numerical score below 70.
I like that. One more question on my part. So are there situations where a child, before the material is taught, like do a pre-assessment that they may earn an I? Is that possible? Does that happen? And I'm asking because I've been in conferences and they say, well, this is an I, but it's because we just began teaching this standard. So how would we navigate that?
Welcome, Mr. Gaskins. You just arrived in the heat of a discussion.
So I heard the end of Ms. Hull's question about an I, and an I, if I can give clarity, and Ms. Hull, if I'm off about this, please correct me. An I is given in two different ways. One at the elementary level, which has, I don't want to say less of an impact, but the I is more significant at the high school level because students they're working towards credit to make that I up before that I turns into an F. The I at the elementary and middle school level is less impactful because those students are not working towards credit. But I came in on the end of your question, so I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Yeah,
That's
so
really
it
helpful.
definitely makes sense. Yes, thank you.
Because
Okay.
we were only discussing it from a standards-based eye at the elementary level. So that's really helpful. I don't know, and I hate to go back over this, but maybe we need to just hit those highlights. Do you mind, Dr. Yeager? So we can now look at it a little differently.
Sure. So the issue was, this is regulation IHA R1, which you recommended for review only. And Mr. Pruitt pointed out that while we have grades and numbers for all the grades above fifth grade, so 6th, 7th, 8th, high school, we do not have any numerical score associated with the elementary school grading. And that's against the law. According to the law he's posted, for 4th and 5th graders require by law a passing grade set at 70. And so we were trying to then equate the 70 to the grade of insufficient progress towards the standards, but we were trying to make sure if that was an accurate assessment of the I.
So that might go back to Mr. Pruitt's question. Mr. Pruitt, we may have needed to consult you earlier because we also talked about the need for a numeric score at 4th and 5th grade, but we thought, which may be incorrect, that we could waive the grading requirement at 4th and 5th grade. And that's why we have the indicators versus the grade. So I don't know if that is right or incorrect.
But you want to use the charter system waiver to not do it for 4 and 5.
My understanding is that we had been using the waiver. That's why we have not changed it to a numerical grade at 4 or 5.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, not knowing that was the reasoning, I didn't know to look at that. So I'd have to go back and look at my list of what can and can't be waived.
And I definitely think that is, Dr. Yeager, we could definitely pull this and come back because we definitely had some conversations with principals around grading. And if that is something that we have flexibility around or something that we're required to do, we would definitely want to get some feedback. Some feedback from teachers and some leaders.
So is that a waiver? Is that a waiver that the district's been listing that it uses when you do that annual report to the Department of Education?
I am not sure. I would have to defer to Mr. Harris or Mr. Ezekiel, Dr. Ezekiel. I'm looking back now, Mr. Pruitt, but it's going to take me a minute to look through all of our reports from prior to my tenure.
Okay, so I guess what I'm hearing is we might need to postpone this discussion or just this policy revision.
I agree. I do have a question, however, with the waiving, if we were to use that waiver system for 4th and 5th graders, does that affect students transferring into the district if they're coming from other school districts that use a numerical grade?
No, ma'am, it doesn't. The only grades that it would be a concern is high school grades.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Or what about kids that leave our district and go to some district that has, I guess, those grades are not on their permanent record so much. Okay. the threat of the permanent record.
Yeah.
Okay, well, unless we can, well, if you guys come up with an answer before the end of the meeting, we can revisit, but we should probably postpone for now until we have an answer. So I will entertain a motion to postpone
So moved.
IHA R1.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Okay. All right, I think the rest are easy. Of course, I'm totally jinxing myself by saying that. Let's see. So IHAB number 8, report cards. This one was a fairly minor revision, the removal of a specific number of weeks and a minor grammatical edit, I thought, although I'm not sure I like the grammatical edit, but I'm going to just let it be. It doesn't quite seem grammatical to me, but it's okay, I guess. Any other comments or questions about this one? Okay. Any motion to move it forward?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor of moving forward the recommended revisions for IHAB report cards? Vote aye.
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 Okay. Thank you. Number 9, policy IHAD, parent conferences. This one was recommended to rescind. I didn't see any explanation, so I will defer to Mr. Gaskins for his explanation. I also note that legal counsel suggested the topic of requesting exemptions from minimum instruction is covered elsewhere.
Right. So we're not required to inform the state, the DOE of parent conferences.
Okay.
And part of our commitment, as you all know, to parent conferences is we include them in our academic calendar. So they're still happening, but there's not a required process to inform the DOE.
So they're not taking away from instructional time the way they're set up. Okay.
Right. Because we have
Right.
a seat waiver, a seat time waiver.
Oh, okay. So that's part of the seat time waiver.
Mhm.
Okay. Any other questions or concerns about IHAD? Okay. Can we have a motion to move it forward, please?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. That passes. Then we have IHB homework and IHB Reg 1, both of which were recommended to be rescinded. Again, I didn't see quite any explanation. I know homework is changed over the years. This was written in 2011. So Mr. Gaskins, would you like to help us out with these two? Why
Yes,
you wanted
ma'am.
to rescind them?
So this policy talked about the homework policy being developed by the superintendent. We, in practice, don't do that. We meet as an elementary group, a middle school group, and a high school group. And then those leaders work with their teachers to create the homework policy for their school. The guidance that we give schools is that homework can be no more than 10%. So the policy and the regulations was really out of alignment with what the actual practice was in the schools. And then because homework has evolved over time, we see, I guess, less and less traditional homework happening and more projects and long-term assignments.
And you didn't think it was necessary to replace the policy with another policy, you just decided to rescind it. So we don't need another policy about what you just said?
I don't believe so, because our leaders are pretty in alignment with their practices around homework.
So, Mr. Gaskins, I guess my only question, I agree with the current, and I'm starting to sound like board members. Y'all are rubbing off on me. But what I agree our current leaders are, what happens when you have someone who is like an outlier? Do we need something for those instances, or do you think that can be managed in another way? I'm fine if it can. I just know sometimes, you have that one person who wants to go rogue, but maybe there's another mechanism to manage that.
I am trying to look at my notes, and maybe Mr. Pruitt can help me. I believe, and I don't want to misspeak, so I'm trying to look it up now, that there may be a state policy around homework that makes it no more than 10%.
Okay.
And I think if that is true, and I have not made that up in my head, then that would resolve that, Dr. Thomas.
Okay.
But I don't have my notes in front of me, so I'm trying to look it up.
Okay.
I didn't find anything, at least nothing that required a local policy on homework when I looked.
Did not require a policy. Okay, so there may be some state policy that just says 10% or whatever, but okay, so it doesn't require that local districts have a policy on homework. That's good. I just imagine that one of our other board members might ask the question Dr. Thomas just asked, which is totally eliminating the policy means we've got nothing to lean on if something goes wrong. But
I think we can, if we did choose to revise it, just put something in it simply that, homework should be aligned to state standards and count no more than 10% of a student's final grade. And that would be the policy. There was also a regulation. I still support rescinding the regulation, because I think that the regulation gives too much, takes too much autonomy from teachers in schools around homework. But I think, to your point, Dr. Thomas, if we just say align to state standards and counts no more than 10% of a student's final grade, I think that would help create guardrails around outliers.
okay, I'm writing the sentence I just heard you say. Homework should be aligned to state standards and account for no more than 10% of the grade. Is that what I heard?
Yes.
As one who tutors and work with parents, and also different students from different schools at the same time, I do appreciate that being in there. I think it's best to have something. So I appreciate that.
Dr. Yeager, you had a space. You see the space between then and 10%.
Okay.
Or I'm sorry, Angela. Dr. Yeager was typing it in the chat and you were typing it on the.
Okay, so we will be revising IHB to have that sentence, delete all the rest, and then rescinding IHB R1. Is that what I understand?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Can we make a motion for that?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor of moving this recommendation forward, say aye.
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 Great, thank you. It's 5:30. Do we need to finish up in time for people to take a little break before the 6 o'clock meeting? How much of a break do you need? 10 minutes, 15 minutes? 20
I need-
minutes.
I need
20,
about
15.
15 because I've been going straight through. I came straight.
I totally understand. Okay, so we have about 15 minutes then before we need to adjourn this meeting. I think we can get through a few more, hopefully. Ms. Hall, did you say, did you say 15 minutes is enough for you?
I can adjust. I'm all over the place tonight, so I can adjust.
Okay, thank you. All right. Policy IHEA, makeup opportunities. This was a very minor revision, adding or designate after approval by the superintendent and no other changes. Dr. Thomas, are you on board with this edit? Yes, okay. And then there's IHEA R1, which was a review only, so we can probably move these forward together. Are there any questions or comments? I think this is pretty much state law, this makeup opportunity, right? Is that what I understood?
Yes, that's what the.
I was
Is that
about
right?
to ask Attorney Pruitt if he knew if that was. I thought so, but I wasn't definitive.
Let's see. I don't know. I just said that it complies with law, so I'll have
Okay.
to go back and figure out that question.
I had the sense that it was, but even so, even if it's not, you said it complies with law, whether it's required or not is fine.
Right.
Mr. Gaskins, we need these two policies, I presume, or this policy and this reg. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions or concerns about makeup opportunities?
I have a quick question, and I know it's a regulation, so I don't want to step too far. But I'm curious where it says like that. And I'm sorry, wait, are we on the regulation or the policy?
We're doing both at the same time, so go ahead.
Okay. In the regulation where it says that all makeup work should be completed by the student and returned to the teacher within 1 week after the student receives the makeup work, does that mean that if the teacher receives it after that 1 week that it can't be counted, or this just sort of gives guidance? And I'm asking that from being in high schools and knowing sometimes with students, there's a variety of different responses that
It is more of guidance, Dr. Gant. We
Okay.
have teachers that give much more time than that. But we do have teachers that have sometimes given less time than that. So like that minimum that we're asking for is a week. And then we try to work, it has been our practice to work with students around making up those assignments. So our high schools, I'm just talking about high school for a second. I don't know if that was specifically your question, but we had long conversations about makeup work. And I don't have the program of study in front of me, but we've also included it in the program of study around makeup work to be very, I think, accommodating to families around missing assignments.
Okay, and it sounds like it's your impression from that feedback from principals and teachers that this is a fair balance.
Yeah, the challenge that was presented to us is that not having all makeup work due at the end of the semester, because that puts a strain on the teacher, and then that takes away from the quality of feedback that the student will get, because really the work is for practice to help them become proficient. And if students are turning in a lot of makeup work at the end of the semester, it's just for the grade and not for the quality of the assignment. So it's kind of the balance between, we need you to turn it in, but we don't want you to turn everything in at the end of the semester.
So do we need to add the word approximately in front of the 1 week, within approximately 1 week? This is for high school where these details are in the reg, to offer some flexibility. I don't know. What I heard from Dr. Gann is that there's some need for flexibility.
I was just curious as far as like sometimes we'll have the policy and then we have like what happens in real life, and then what, and like trying to merge the two, having worked with at-risk students, it is a balance, Mr. Gasson, you're absolutely right. It's like turning stuff at the end of the year at that point is for grade, but then the other side of that is, understanding where students are and their lived experiences and things like that. But I don't want to get too far in suggesting. I just wanted to be sure my interpretation of that regulation was correct, and that there is that after that 1 week. Yeah, I just wanted to be sure I had an appropriate interpretation.
I think that's a good point, Dr. Gant. And now I'm thinking, because we haven't, to my knowledge, had any issues with makeup work, even in a pandemic. But I also don't want parents not to know the policy because the practice is different. And then Dr. Yeager, I think approximately 1 week may be too vague and then up for interpretation. And then that doesn't get us to the consistency that we may need. So I think we do need a time, but I wonder if 1 week is not enough time. So I just asked a lot of questions and I think you all were asking me for answers.
So
Well, it
instead of a
sounds
week,
like you, I was gonna say, it sounds like you've, like, if the teachers are, if teachers feel okay with this and it doesn't, create an undue burden, and principals and things like that, and you say y'all haven't had any issues, and, perhaps it's not a problem.
I guess my only concern is where do we have to draw the balance of preparing these students for after high school? Like I understand, that they have different circumstances and we want to be mindful and be accommodating. But what is too accommodating if we then say on the other side that we want to be a school district with rigor? So I guess that's why I get kind of confused with that, with with students turning in work last minute and and getting points for it. So what are we saying for students who turn their work in on time? Like, I guess I don't want to get too far in the weeds. I'll wait until I'm off the board to have this conversation. This may be operational, but that does trouble me. Like, finding that balance. I see it within the 1 week, but then we start getting into like it's the end of the term, and then you want to turn in 10 assignments.
It's interesting, Dr. Maddox, and I don't want to get in the weeds either, so I won't take up too much time. We'll get in trouble with Dr. Yeager, but you're exactly right. And I see it personally with some of these students that Mr. Gaskins laughs about. I've opened my home and there's no excuse. Like, many of them have challenges, and I know the social worker in me recognizes it, but I tell them all the time, the grade fairy is not going to show up in college. You can't just call your college professor, and they're all college bound, and they're going to be in trouble when they wait a whole semester and then the week before grades are due, they send these, oh, help me teacher, and our teachers are very giving, and I'm very appreciative of it. But there is sometimes a level of enabling that takes place. And then when they're in a space of having to sit in Dr. Gant's class, Dr. Yeager's class, Dr. Maddox's class, and there are deadlines, they're not going to, I just keep telling them, you all are so spoiled. I say it all the time. And this is not going to happen when you get in college, that you can just, and professors just going to open back up assignments and open back up grade books just because you just didn't want to. And you didn't want to because you've never had to. Because year after year after year, these magical fairies appear and they work it out. And then when it's not worked out, you flunk out, for lack of a more professional way. And so I think we do have to find a balance there and recognizing, and I think you're right, Dr. Gant, that there are kids who have extraordinary circumstances, and that's where connections, relationships, and engagement takes place, where this child is taking care of siblings at home, or mom is working all night, or their house burned, or there's alcoholism. But you have to get to know your kids, and then you have those who are just perpetually lazy and they know you're gonna open it back up the night before and they'll stay up all night. And it says to me, you could have done it all along. So, and then there's a rigor issue with that, because if you can get it done overnight, then what is the level of expectation we have set where the work is quality enough that it's passing? So that gets into, I have strong feelings about that too. So, because I see it on both ends.
But I think that may answer the question, Dr. Thomas. I think that in practice, we have teachers that are accepting, not requiring the makeup work prior to 1 week, which we have stated in the policy. We have more teachers that are being more accommodating and extending it past the 1 week. So we're saying at a minimum, give students at least a week to turn in their makeup assignments. But Dr. Gann is correct. There are teachers that have different practices that doesn't violate the policy, but gives more leeway.
Thank y'all for keeping on talking. It allowed me to redo my legal research. So the only, so yes, it complies now. So here's the only state rule. It's only to do with sports eligibility. And it says, it doesn't say you have to give any makeup opportunity at all, but it says purposes of sports eligibility, if you choose to give an opportunity to do makeup, you cannot give them more than 14 days. You can't let your football players make up all their work on the last day of school.
Okay, that's good to know. So does a 14-day instead of the week make more sense then? It gives a little bit of leeway. So I don't think, so the way it's written right now, it doesn't give teachers the option to go longer than a week. It says all work should be completed and returned to the teacher within 1 week. So if you mean it to say no less than 1 week, then it should say no less than 1 week, not within 1 week. Does that make sense, what I said? Because I think what I heard you say, Mr. Gaskins, is that teachers can't insist that that the work gets turned in less than a week, but that's not what this says.
Right.
This is putting the reins on the teachers that go beyond 1 week.
I think I would want to get some feedback from our high school leaders, because I know that teachers are giving more than 1 week. And I would want to know, well, I guess it would be 2 weeks, because it could be no more than 2 weeks to be aligned with state policy based on what Mike said. So the revision,
for sports, yeah.
So the revision would be 2 weeks, and then that would be in compliance with sports and then all students, because we wouldn't give a different expectation for non-athletes.
Okay, well, that makes it easier. We just add the word to and an S on the end. And we can move it forward. And you still have time to work it out if you want to make another change. I mean, we got plenty of time, but we could move it forward and then talk about it at the board meeting. Just in an effort to get one more thing done before the time clock kicks. Are people okay with that? So changing it to Angela, all makeup work. So the second paragraph of high school, all makeup work should be completed by the student and returned to the teacher within 2 weeks after the student receives the makeup work.
I'm sorry, but it's burning. I gotta ask this. Okay, so if so do they get the same grade? So if they turn this work in 2 weeks, do they all get the same grade? I turn mine in on time. Dr. Gant turns her in at the 2 week mark. Do we both get the same grade?
Well, this is for students who are absent from school for some reason.
Oh, okay.
This is not just anybody, I don't think. Maybe it is. Is it? I think
So
it's
you're
if you're
correct,
absent.
Dr. Yeager. It's allowed when students return to school.
Oh, yeah, but that's return is such a, there's so many possibilities as far like returning from where.
For me. Yeah.
All right. Okay, so it is 5:45. I think what I'm hearing is that we can leave the minor revisions of IHEA alone and move that one forward, and then we will stop at this regulation and think about it more before the next meeting. Is that what I'm hearing? Okay,
So
so
moved.
yeah, thank you. A motion to move IHEA makeup opportunities with its minor revision forward to the board. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. And all in favor, say aye.
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 So I guess my last question is, do you want to push these up for tonight and amend the agenda to include these I policies with the other I policies? It's a week before the meeting, so we can do that, I think. Dr. Gant, what do you think? Can we move these up tonight to the work session?
I think we should be able to,
Okay,
if the policy, if everybody else is okay with that.
I don't have any problems with that.
okay, so Angela, if I understand that correctly, it would be number 4, IG, which had minor revisions or revisions. Number 5, IGB, student support teams. Number 6, IHA, and number 7, IHAR1 grading systems with the new sentence for the I. Or did we want to postpone that one? I'm
That
sorry,
was
we postponed that one. I'm sorry. So just the IHA, but not the reg.
Mhm.
Thank you, sorry. Number 8, IHAB report cards. Number 9, IHAD parent conferences rescinded. And then number 10, IHB homework minor revisions stop. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just 6. Did I get that right?
I'm sorry. Homework had a regulation that I think we're rescinding. We're not pushing that one forward.
Oh, we did that sentence, right? Sorry, we did that. We made that one sentence change, right? We rescinded and we changed it to a review. Oh, no, sorry. We are rescinding the reg. You're right. And the the policy has a one sentence revision. Yes, you're right.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you. Okay, so we are rescinding, so that's 11. And then we are doing 12 makeup opportunities. Where's my colored pencils? Okay, so 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 6, 5, and 4. Move up to tonight's agenda. Okay, and I can send everybody my little summary for those. Okay, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
See y'all in 11 minutes.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks, Angela.
Welcome. I actually got them all added to the agenda. I was trying to add them as we were going along. So
Oh,
they're
good.
all on the work session agenda.
Okay, so we don't need to make a motion to add them. We just have them in there.
Right. I
Okay.
went ahead and just pushed them over there.
Thank you.
I figured it'd be easier for them to see them. And I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you so much.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Take 5 minutes. Oh, shoot.